Right. Hey, everybody. I'm happy to be back at Intermittent again. Let's go ahead and get to this slide. Yes. All right. Happy to be here. I'm happy to be back in Detroit for the first time in 9 years. Things are very different. Okay. I would, oh, wow, that's really small print. Sorry, you see I have bifocals, so this talk is gonna focus on the only 20/20 vision I still have, and that's hindsight. Basically, we're going to look at a situation, honestly, one of the worst, in my opinion, one of my worst theater experiences in my career. We're gonna go back a few years, travel across the world, and see how a natural disaster and timing almost ruined a show at the happiest place on earth. And this talk is Translation, Typhoons, and the show that nearly wasn't. Welcome. Go with me on a ride, if you will. So first off, who am I? That's me right there. See, I like making gifts of myself because I am that vain. Thank you. I am an actress, writer, marketing and promotions manager for Black Nerd Problems, and former principal vocalist at Hong Kong Disneyland. Now, I had no idea that there was a Disneyland in Hong Kong until they hired me. I'm sure you guys didn't know either. It's really cute. If you get a chance, go there. It's very nice. Most inexpensive Disney park. That's me with Donald Duck, that lovely guy. And I know you're wondering, like, why is she looking like she escaped from the live-action reboot of the Jetsons? I was wondering the same thing. We were doing a tribute show in 2008 for the Beijing Olympics. And I'm like, wow, a tribute show, that had to be amazing. It was, until it wasn't. So welcome to 2008. You have all of us lovely people, and we were presenting Mickey Presents Dream Sports Moments. Now, for this show, we were 3 sports coaches who were helping Mickey and Minnie and Donald and Goofy and Chip and Dale find their dream sports. So that may have been weightlifting, it may have been rhythmic gymnastics, it may have been, badminton, it may have been volleyball. And this show was really intense. What we had to do was we had 4 weeks to rehearse 3 separate casts of dancers, character performers, vocalists, and we had to do this while all of us were in other shows in the park and parades, and so, the world kept turning. And the show had special effects. We had a mobile stage that rode out into the park and parked in front of Sleeping Beauty's castle. We had audience participation. We had at least 3 different languages happening in this show. So it's a lot going on. And working on any show is like herding cats. I'm sure, if you had a behind-the-scenes peek at what goes on trying to put up Intermittent for one day, you can imagine what putting up this show that ran 7 days a week in a park with a mobile stage and tried not to run over children because then that's a lawsuit, and you had people in full costumes with giant feet and tried to get the kids up, and it's like, oh, okay, come on and play, all right, psych, just go back into the audience, don't touch anybody, thank you so much. So no, that's real because y'all know how kids are at parks. Y'all know how they are with costume characters, you've seen the kids, you know what it's like. So, I just want to say thank you guys. Be patient with me. I'm winging it because I accidentally made my notes too small. So, we basically had 3 big problems. Our problems were translation, time, and a typhoon. We'll get to the typhoon later. But first, I want to start with our first issue, and that is translation. So what do I mean by translation? Now, we had an international cast. We had people who were from mainland China, people who were from Hong Kong itself. We had a couple of Americans, we had people from the Philippines, and then our director was brought in from Disneyland Paris. So that's several languages spoken between all of us. So we had English, we had Mandarin, we had Cantonese, we had Tagalog, and we had French. Now, most of us shared English, and I say most because everybody did not speak English. So, and within the show, it was also different. So the vocalists, we sang and spoke in English. Oh, did I go forward? Nope, meant to go back. Here we go. So, sorry guys, we gotta do this all over again. So the vocalist, we sang and spoke in English. We had the MC that said all of her lines twice. She said them once in Cantonese, then she repeated them again in Mandarin. And then we had Mickey, whose lines were in Cantonese. And I don't speak Cantonese, I don't speak Mandarin. All of the lines in the script that were not in English were written in simplified Chinese, which is a very difficult language to learn if you don't know it. And all of Mickey's lines were set on a track. That meant that everything, like what he said, was just laid out in stone. So we had to fit our lines and all of our other little like interjections in between where his lines fell. And we didn't want it to be, oh, you say your line and then there's a 5-minute gap until Mickey's line comes in, or you're talking and then Mickey suddenly like interrupts you. So it's like, oh yeah, and then just be like, oh, and you're like, oh, okay, sorry. And then you just have to stand there awkwardly like, yeah, okay, cool. Thanks, kid. So what was really difficult is, as we're trying to rehearse these 3 different casts simultaneously, we have to figure out how to give all these instructions quickly and clearly with a director who only spoke English and French. So what did we do about this? Our solution. 1, we would create small translation groups. So people who spoke similar languages would get together, and there would usually be one person who spoke English and the other language, and they would translate for everybody else. So it was like you would see little clusters of people, and we would get an instruction, and then they would translate, and then everybody would kind of do what they were asked. And there was always a delay because that takes time. The other thing we would do is we requested the tracks as soon as possible so we could like try to learn Mickey's lines phonetically, because there was no other option for those of us who didn't speak Cantonese. And then our director's choice was to blow up at everyone for not listening and then start screaming at us in French. It's a choice. May not have been the best one, but it was a choice. So what could we have done better to make this, like to better our collaborative process? So 1, we could have analyzed our teams to discover our strengths and weaknesses. We knew that there were people who wouldn't understand English. We knew that the only way for all of us to communicate was in English. We should have taken the time to see who needed extra help and then who could help them and make sure we built into our schedule time for them to get the instructions correct so we could all move along at the same time instead of having to like scramble to do this and then scramble to do that. And so now we've lost time because they scrambled to do this and then we lost time because they scrambled to do that. So our next problem is a bit easier to explain, and that is time. So we had 3 weeks to rehearse this show, and then we had 1 week to put it up on stage in our costumes and with sound and with the props and actually perform in front of the castle, and that had to happen outside of park hours when everybody was gone. So what do we do about this? Like, what was our solution? We just rehearsed all the time, literally all the time. Rehearsal, rehearsal, rehearsal. We had other shows to do in the park, didn't matter. Our other coworkers, they had to pick up the slack. We were in rehearsal. If we had free time, we were in rehearsal. Lunch, working lunch, we're in rehearsal. Like constantly rehearse, 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 rehearse. All rehearsal, all the time. And then sometimes shows and parades, but mostly rehearsal. So what could we have done better? We could have prioritized, divided, and conquered. So the main thing we had to do was get a single cast ready for opening day so that the press could come and they could take all the pictures and everybody would know, oh, it's an Olympic show. We get to see Mickey do Olympic stuff and it'll be great. Like we just had to get one group of people ready. So instead of trying to work at maximum output constantly, what we could have done is focused on getting that core group of people ready and then feed everybody else in. So we didn't put undue strain on our coworkers. We didn't put undue strain on ourselves. And mind you, this was an outdoor show in Hong Kong in the high heat of summer. That's not the time you want to put a strain on performers. And especially the people who were in full Mickey, Minnie, Goofy, Donald regalia. That's very difficult. No, they don't get fans in those costumes. They just get a white jumpsuit. So we had one more big problem. and that was the lovely Typhoon. So a typhoon that's basically a hurricane in the Pacific Ocean. It spins the other way. It's really terrible. So we had a typhoon decide to hit our special administrative region, and it spent a lovely 3 days just rolling over us. So we had our mobile stage, but because it was very top heavy, if it was hit by any of those 63 mile per hour winds, the whole thing would tip over, which, just imagine, 60 feet tall letters tipping over. It would kind of look like this. Yep. Yeah. Only with a lot more screaming and a lot more neon. And I know you guys are expecting, like, okay, so what did you guys, how did you beat this? What did you do to, like, survive this? Because, like, this is Mother Nature. Like, how are you going to beat Mother Nature? We did not. And, like, I think this is the one thing that we conquered well. We decided to call it a day. They sent us home, and we waited it out. And, like, sometimes that's all you can do. Sometimes there are insurmountable odds that your team can't beat, and you just got to roll with it. So how can we all make teams better? And I understand everybody's not going to have the same experience. Like, you guys aren't going to take your team to Hong Kong and put up an Olympic show with Mickey and Minnie and Goofy and Donald, and then have to fight a typhoon and have to deal with people speaking a bunch of different languages. That's okay. I got you. I made this applicable for all of us. So here we go. So first off, everybody on your team wants to succeed. Nobody on your team wants to fail. So if you just tap into that, there's a strength in that. There's a power in that. There's a magic in that, in a team that wants your goal to happen. So you can also utilize the skills and strengths in others. Strengths can't really help us unless we use them. Weaknesses can only hurt us if we ignore them. So understand that people on your team, they know what they're doing. You've assembled an amazing team. I trust you guys. I know when you build a team, you're like building your A-team. It's like the Avengers. So you're bringing in the people you need. Trust that you've brought in the people you need. Trust that they have the skills that you need. And go for it. You need to, most importantly, create a space where people feel able to ask for and offer help. If people don't feel like they can get the help they need, they just struggle in silence and they'll pull your whole project down. If people don't feel like they can offer a hand to someone else, then those are strengths that just go unutilized and wasted. And finally, just give up when Mother Nature's in charge. Like, you can't, no, that's not it. It's know when a problem is too big to push through. There are some things we can't conquer, and that's okay. Like, everything doesn't have to be power through this, power through that, power through this, power through that. It's okay to just admit defeat. All right? And honestly, we struggled day after day after day after day in that rehearsal room. But once we finally got the show up, people loved it. And that's because we had a team of professionals who wanted that show to succeed, no matter how much stress we put on ourselves. And no, your team is there for you, and you just need to be there for your team, whether you're leading or whether you're just a member. And that is all. So thank you so much, you guys. Thank you for listening to my rambling story.